Okay, good morning everyone. Sorry for the delayed start. Yeah, let's jump right in because we're running a little behind here. So, not yesterday, but the day before, we started on Russia and the Soviet Union, right? So we're taking a little bit of a step back, chronologically speaking, because we had just come to the end of the Second World War, about 1945. Now we're just going to jog back. What's that? Oh, okay. We're just going to jog back a little bit to 1917 or so and just follow the Russia story through because, as most of us know, Russia's going to be a pretty big deal, or the Soviet Union's going to be a pretty big deal in the second half of the 20th century, right? So we need to sort of understand what's going on in this country and where it kind of comes from. So we said, of course, we started off on Thursday by talking about the appearance of communism, right? Very important, brand new political system for the 20th century, right? Nobody's ever tried it before. It's the work of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. There's Marx with his epic beard. It's kind of two-tone, hey? It's kind of two-tone. Do you think he dyed his mustache? I don't know. Like I've got some mixed colors here, but most of my gray is kind of around here. So maybe that's what happens. Maybe the gray starts around here, and then I don't know.
I'll check that with you in a couple minutes.
Yeah. How old do you think he was there? So 83. Well, check back with me in like 20 years, maybe 30. People aged quicker then. Right. So he writes these two very influential pieces here, Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. Again, I mentioned during his lifetime, people don't take a lot of notice of him, but he does become incredibly influential later on, right? And
It's always often now.
it's well, yeah, often it is, right?
Musicians.
Yeah, but it's difficult to imagine. It's difficult to imagine the 20th century without this guy's ideas, right? So, I said that both Marx and Engels live in a period of rapid social change, right? So, the Britain and France and Europe are kind of industrializing. People are moving to the cities. Cities are growing up. They're getting not high rises, but multi-floor buildings and apartments. People are working factory jobs. And in the process of those factory jobs, Marx is looking around and saying, hey, this capitalism, this version of capitalism is very exploitive, right? The proletariat, the poor factory worker is, working hard all day long, yet the profits from that person's labor do not belong to them. It belongs to the owner of the company, right? And again, we still see that. The Amazon workers work very hard, but it's Jeff Bezos who will profit, right? He's the one who gets rich. And Marx says, this is BS, right? This is exploitive. Really, the proletariat need to rise up, right? They need to rise up. Andre, are you with me? They need to rise up. They need to overthrow the bourgeoisie, take control of the means of production, the factory, and then share those profits equally, right?
The soil is fair
Yeah,
that's how they use the US communism.
yeah. That's exactly what he was thinking, right? He was like, that's fair, right? One guy just getting all of the profits just because he owns the place, that's not fair, right? And again, whether you think so or not depends on your political values, but Marx said, yeah, it's a scam, right? It needs to be overthrown. Now, communist states are a little bit different, of course, and in some ways, sometimes we confuse them with fascist states, right? And again, we confuse them with fascist states because they're usually a one-state system or a one-party system, the Communist Party. They usually put the goods and the good and the needs of the state before the rights of individual people. Yes, and so and they tend to have authoritarian governments as well, right? And so it's easy to kind of confuse them. They look similar from that authoritarian perspective, but it's really their economies that differentiate them. Well, it's more than that, but here with communism, we have a situation where everything is owned by the state. All businesses are state-owned. Everyone works for the state. Everyone is paid by the state. It's a full. It's a.
Does that include the government as well?
Yep.
So everyone's paid, so
There's
paid.
Oh, you're not necessarily paid the same amount, but you're paid based on what you need. So, yeah, so if you have like 5 kids and I have one, you're probably going to get a bigger apartment or house than I do because you need more. Doesn't matter if I'm a doctor and you're a garbage man or vice versa. So in theory, everybody gets the things that they need and everybody gives as much as they are able to, right? Again, neither of those things work out in practice, but that's on paper, that's what's supposed to happen, okay? We said that we're gonna have communism in Russia, but not before we get rid of the Tsar, right? And the Tsar is kind of like a king. His family has ruled Russia for some time. But Russia is kind of ripe for revolution. They are not very industrialized. Most people are very poor. They're peasants working on a farm that they don't own. We hear in the textbook that they're struggling with food shortages and labor issues. And so there's a lot of unhappy people in Russia at the time, right? And so actually I'm going to skip ahead because yeah. Oh yeah, so here's Tsar Nicholas, the last Tsar of Russia, with his family. I believe his wife is she Ekaterina? Is that what her name was? I've forgotten.
Some variation of
Yeah, maybe it's Ekaterina. His family here. His youngest son in the front is of particular concern to Tsar Nicholas because his son has a blood disorder. He's a hemophiliac. Do you know what that means? Yeah, well, he lacks the appropriate amount of platelets, I believe. So his blood doesn't clot very well. So if he cuts himself, he might actually bleed to death and die, right? And it doesn't have to be a big cut. So Tsar Nicholas is kind of very concerned with his young son Alexei here. And again, he's more concerned with that than really governing Russia or taking care of. Probably not, but I mean, you know, keep in mind that, they can bleed internally or externally. So even a bruise, if you get hit really hard, you'll bleed internally, right? But your blood will clot, you'll have a bruise and it'll go away. But Alexei's blood won't clot very well, and he will bleed and turn purple, and yeah, it can be really bad. So yeah, Tsar Nicholas is appropriately concerned about his son. But again, the peasants don't care. The peasants are unhappy and want reform, right? They want change. What's that? No, they're rakes, I think. Yeah. That's the other thing about Russian agriculture is that it's not very technologically developed, right? So other countries are using tractors and kind of fertilizers and more kind of complicated techniques. They're still farming in the 1600s, right? They're not using any technology. They're just doing it the old-fashioned way, the unproductive way. We read this section of the text, and we talked about the Russo-Japanese War kind of started everything off, right? So the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese and the Russians go to war over Manchuria, right? They both want Manchuria for its, what's that? Part of China, yep. They both want this part of China for its mineral riches and its natural resources. Japan, of course, will win. The underdog, right? A surprising win, but for the Japanese, party time, right? For the Russians, it's like, wow, what happened, right? This tiny little island nation, this little Asian nation that nobody has paid attention to, has defeated a European power. Shock, right? At least for the Russians. And so this kind of helps to undermine Tsar Nicholas. It doesn't sort of help the fact that everyone in Russia is upset with the economic inequality and the food shortages, and now they've lost this war, and it's just one thing after another, right? So Russia was humiliated, and following some protests here in St. Petersburg in 1905, the Tsar is kind of motivated to create a Duma, right? A representative government, right? So there's now a bunch of people sitting in government, supposedly representing the people. In fact, they are the rich nobles, so they don't represent the poor peasants, they represent their own interests. But anyway, there is a representative government and there's the Tsar, right? But again, the Tsar is not really interested in having this kind of legislature there. He's not interested in sharing power with them. And so things don't really work, right? The Tsar is constantly trying to sort of keep the legislature from doing anything. The legislature is trying to get things done. Not very good, right? Yeah, so we talked about this, a poor economy, very primitive agriculture, and the fact that Russia was heavily in debt, right? So they had borrowed a lot of money because they weren't making a lot. They had sold out a lot of their national resources to foreign ownership. So, yeah, bad economic management, right? Bad economic management here. So there's a revolution is imminent, right? And actually they kind of have a few, right? They have a few steps towards revolution. What's kind of the first thing that happens? The creation of that Duma, right? Of the representative government. And then what's the second thing that happens? It happens in February of 1917, February Revolution. You gonna Google it? Okay.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
I'm pretty sure it was. February of 1917. February 28th? Don't quote me on the date. Maybe it's October 28th. Nope. 25th of October. What happens in
Civil War?
Nope, Civil War comes later. Civil War comes later.
Sorry, what was the question?
What happens in 1917, February of 1917?
The political instability.
Yep.
The Bolshevik seized power.
Yeah, well, they're going to seize power in
October.
October, right? So in February, what's going to happen? The Tsar is going to... It's what you do when you use the stairs.
Steps down.
Hey!
Oh.
Climb. Climb. Oh, God. Okay.
It's been a week. It's been a week since I've read it.
I'm back. Okay. That one knocked me down, but
You climbed up.
I climbed up. So, yeah, the Tsar steps down, right? So he's convinced to finally step down, and that representative government, they formed a provisional government. What does provisional mean? Provisional. You can Google that. Provisional.
Arranged or existing for the present.
Say that again?
Arranged or existing for the present, possibly it will be changed later.
Arranged or existing for the present, maybe changed later, right? So it's kind of a temporary thing, right? So they create a provisional government, a government that's kind of temporary. They're going to change it later, but what they're going to do is they're going to try to draft some sort of a constitution for Russia, right? How is the new Russia going to work? What kind of government are they going to have? How is their democracy going to work? How are elections going to work? Blah, 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 right? That's what the provisional government is trying to do, is basically create a new Russia, right? A Russia without a czar. What does the government look like and how does it work, right? So the provisional government is busily working away trying to do that, right? But keep in mind, they're also in the middle of a war, right? There's a world war going on, which Russia is involved in and is taking a bit of a kicking, right? So, sorry, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. as we see here, the provisional government is kind of very challenged from the beginning, right? There's internal struggles, right? So you probably read about in the text, there's this guy Kornilov and Lvov and Kerensky, Alexander Kerensky. They're all kind of fighting for power internally, right? So there's kind of internal power struggles. Meanwhile, the government is trying to fight a war on the outside, right? So they've got a ton of problems, right? They've got economic issues. The people are, demonstrating in the streets saying they want more bread, they want better labor conditions. The Tsar has just stepped down. They're trying to recreate the government of Russia from scratch. They don't even know what they're doing. They're fighting a world war against the Germans. There's a lot of crap going on, is there not? Chaos, right? And so it's a challenge. You can see here that there's some, internal struggles, which I don't think that's more detail than we need to know, right? The first coalition and the second coalition, we don't really need to know about that. But in comes this guy, right? And who's this guy?
Lennon.
Yeah, this is Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, right? He
Other pictures I've seen.
well, okay. I've seen a bunch of pictures of him, so I think it looks representative. Well, how does he look different here to you?
Maybe I might be thinking about someone else.
Maybe. Stalin?
Yeah.
So here's Lenin. Let me just see here. 22. Where is my page with Lenin? Here he is. Nope. There he is. So in comes this guy, right? So there's lots of political chaos. There's lots of economic chaos. There's a war going on. And in comes this guy, right? And so, again, he's going to institute a revolution in Russia, right? And he's going to do it with the help of, he's going to do it with the help of his party, the Bolsheviks, okay? Bolshe, does anyone speak Russian here? Bolshe means more, okay? So if I'm serving you food, or no, actually it means bigger, I guess. Bolshe. Yeah, it means bigger. So something that's bigger is Bolshe. So the Bolsheviks are, looking for a grander Russia, right? Something greater than what they currently have. You can see Lenin here is reading a copy of the newspaper Pravda. Pravda is the truth, right? That's what Pravda means. Under the Soviet government, it will not print the truth. It will print propaganda, but it'll still be called the truth. So Lenin's a party, Lenin is a member of the Bolshevik party, right? And the Bolsheviks here are into social revolution, right? They want to overturn the existing kind of way of things and create something new, right? They're Marxists, so they're interested in Karl Marx's ideas about communism and socialism. And Lenin is kind of preaching this idea of peace, land, and bread. What do you think he's promising with the peace part?
No more war.
No more war, right? The Russians are fighting this brutal war. They are losing millions of men. It's disastrous. They don't have enough food or resources to fight the war. Lenin's saying, you put me in power, I'll stop it. I'll get us out of the war, right? Land. What do you think he's promising there?
Equal places of living for everyone.
More what?
More living space for everyone.
Yeah, well, not quite, but okay.
Oh, maybe probably more land.
No, that's kind of Hitler's thing, right? Hitler wants more land. Turns out Russia's huge. But who's all the land owned by?
Oh, the Tsar?
What?
The Tsar?
Yeah, well, the Tsar, yes, and then all of the nobles, right? The people who are high up in society, right? So there's the Tsar who owns a lot, let's face it, and then there's these kind of aristocrats, these nobles that own all the land as well. Most of the people in Russia who are farmers own their land, they work on someone else's, right? And so they want their own land, right? They want their own little piece that they can farm and support their families on. And here comes Lenin saying, I will redistribute land. I will give land to the people, right? What's the bread thing? Food, right? They're having food shortages. People are going hungry. Lenin's like, I'll put a stop to that too, right? Simple slogan, three words, right? But
Everything the people want.
But that's everything the people want. They want peace, they want land, they want bread, right? Simple stuff. So, again here, in 1905, we see the Tsar create the Duma, right? That representative government. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. In the February Revolution, that's in 1917, again, the Tsar agrees to step down, right? So again, there's all kinds of demonstrations and food shortages, and the military, so this is the military that is meant to protect the Tsar, they actually go over to the people, right? So the Tsar's guard are standing there, guarding the stores of food, and the people are protesting, we're hungry, we're starved, and the military, the Cossacks say, you know what, they're right, they're starving. And so the military helps the people break into the stores and gives them grain and things like that. So once the sort of military goes over to the people, the Tsar realizes, okay, I'm kind of done, and so he is convinced to step down. And then we have that provisional government, right? That temporary government trying to draft a constitution, trying to run the country, trying to deal with the war. Obviously, there's conflicting ideas about whether they should stay in the war or not. And then along comes, these are the coalitions that I'll skip. And then along comes Lenin and his Bolsheviks, okay? And so it says here that they are backed by the Moscow and the Petrograd Soviets. Does anyone know what a Soviet is? A what? Nope, not quite. That's what we'll call them later, right? When we have the Soviet Union, they're Soviets. But what's a Soviet in this period? A farmer? Nope. I'll tell you. So in this period, there's chaos, right? There's political chaos. The Tsar is not really running the country very well. He steps down. The provisional government is just trying to get their hands on the controls and steer the country. And so some of the bigger cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, they're actually being run by workers' councils, okay? So factory workers kind of create a little council. They get elected to them, so the workers elect representatives. And these little workers' councils are basically running the city, okay? So they're making sure that the police are around. They're making sure the mail continues to... Yeah, they're a self-proclaimed government, right? So they're basically a city government that has created themselves, right? Because nobody in the government, the real government, is doing their job. And so they create a little workers' council, and the workers' councils are running the cities. And they're doing a pretty good job, right? So these Soviets, the Soviets in Moscow and the Soviet in St. Petersburg, actually have a lot of support from the people, because again, in a time of chaos and food shortage and craziness, you want order, right? You want people to organize your city and make sure that the mail comes and that the water is turned on and things like that, right? You want somebody to take charge. And so the Soviets become actually very powerful. And so when Lenin is trying to gain power, he's saying to the people, peace, land, and bread, right? That's what I'm going to give you. And he's also saying, all power to the Soviets, right? So he's saying that if he gets into power, he's going to make those Soviets kind of official, right? He's going to make them legitimate. Now they're just kind of, they're running the city because nobody else is, right? But Lenin is saying, I'll make you real. I'll make you legitimate. I'll give you power over Moscow and St. Petersburg and whatever. So Lenin here has the people behind him, some of the people, the peasants, and the Soviets, right, who are also very powerful as well. And so in October here, he sees his opportunity, right? He and his Bolsheviks storm the Winter Palace and the Duma. They arrest members of the Provisional Government. They throw them in jail. And they proclaim themselves the leaders of Russia, right? Just like that. A little military coup, if you will. What's that?
Sounds easy.
Sounds easy, right? Now, one of the things I want to point out to you, which I think is interesting, is let's actually pay attention to what happened there, because often we hear about Russia having a communist revolution, right? And indeed, they wind up with a communist government. But is that a communist revolution, right? Remember, well, not democratic, but Marx said that what would happen is that the workers would realize that they were being exploited. They would overthrow the bourgeoisie and they would kind of take control of the factories and the means of production for themselves. But is that what happened in Russia? Is that what we just discussed? No. What did we have? We had the Bolsheviks storming the government buildings, arresting everyone, throwing them in jail, and proclaiming themselves the new leaders of Russia. That's not a communist revolution. What is that? That's a hostile takeover, right? That's a coup d'etat, right? That's an overthrow of the state. That's what Lenin and his Bolsheviks actually do. They are communists, so I guess it's an overthrow by communists, but it's not a communist revolution, right? At least not the way that Marx predicted, right? Marx predicted that communism comes from the bottom, right? So if you imagine society like this in a triangle with all the little people down here and the big, powerful, rich people at the top, communism comes from the bottom, right? People get this idea, they get this class consciousness that, hey, we're the ones doing all the work here, we're the ones that should benefit, and they overthrow the top part of society, right? But did that happen? Not quite, right? Here, a political party overthrew the government and then placed themselves at the top of society. And what we'll see now is that communism is going to come from the top down. So this is kind of, in a way, it's kind of the opposite of what Marx said was going to happen, right? Marx said that it will just come from the bottom, right? That people will rise up. In this case, there was an overthrow of the state, and now the Bolsheviks are going to try and institute communism from the top down. Yeah, it kind of is.
The only people that weren't happy with communism was the nobles.
Well, we'll see. We'll see who's happy with it and who's not, right? Before we go into that, though, I would like to exercise our critical thinking skills a little bit and read an article, okay? And so one of the things that historians try to do in their writing is to establish cause and consequence, right? Why did things happen the way they did, right? Why did something else not happen instead? And because this thing happened, what other things happened as a result? And as I think I mentioned, the Russian Revolution is one that's, yeah, like it's difficult to imagine many more events that are more significant in the 20th century than that, right? Maybe the creation of the atomic bomb, right? Maybe the beginnings of World War I and II. But this is such a huge event that it becomes interesting and difficult to think about what would not have happened had we not had this revolution. So what I want to do is I want to read this article, and it's a bit of speculation, this article, because the author is saying, well, what if, right? What if the Russian Revolution had never happened? And so what I'd like you to do is the article is in Microsoft Teams. I'd like you to read it, and I'd like you to pay attention to these questions, okay? So, number one, the author is going to say that there are some parts of the Russian Revolution and Lenin and his Bolsheviks that the author still sees showing up in the modern world, right? So,
Russia specifically, or just the world in general?
in the world in general. So the people who sort of orchestrated the Russian Revolution are still influential today, right? Two, the author is going to talk about some ways in which the Bolshevik Revolution was unlikely to succeed, right? So this is a hugely influential event, but it wasn't a sure thing, right? And the author will describe ways in which, you know, this revolution easily could have not happened in the first place. Three, the author will suggest some ways in which our world would be different had the Russian Revolution not happened. And then the last question is, this is a couple of years old, this article, but in 2017, when the author wrote this, it was the 100th anniversary of the October Revolution, right? This incredibly historically significant event, right? Very significant event, and Russia didn't do anything. There were no parades, there were no celebrations, there were no statements from Vladimir Putin, nothing. They just ignored it. So why? Why would they ignore the anniversary, the 100th year anniversary of something that's so big and so important? Okay? 4 questions for you. So, as I said, the article is in Microsoft Teams under Files, and I'll give you some time to read it. It's an easy read, and I think it's kind of interesting to imagine, you know, what might have happened had this event not. But let's read and see what we find out here. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. To say the article's a few years old, but still relevant. Yeah,
Without him, a lot of things wouldn't have happened.
it's crazy, right?
I didn't think it was that impactful until I read this.
Huge,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, can you think of many more events in the 20th century that are bigger than this?
Now that I know more, no.
So ready to talk or a few more minutes? You're good? Good, you good to go? Okay, let's go. So, very interesting, yes? So what the author starts out with some ideas about, reflections of this, of Lenin or the Bolsheviks that he sees in modern life, and who does he point to, or what does he point to?
Britain,
Right. So we have,
Cuba, and
yeah. Let's talk about Corbett. So Jeremy Corbett, former leader of
he was the prime minister.
no,
He was the minister.
yeah. He's the leader of one of, or he was the leader of one of Britain's political parties. It wasn't Labour, was it?
He was,
Was Labour?
yeah, 15 to 20.
Right. Okay. So Jeremy Corbett, the leader of one of Britain's biggest political parties, says, "Yeah, I'm a Leninist." Right? That's an interesting statement. Who else is a Leninist? Yeah, so they compare some of Lenin's tactics to Donald Trump. What's that?
His campaign strategist.
His campaign strategist, Steve Bannon, right? Steve Bannon, who he got the boot, but of course everyone around Donald Trump eventually gets kicked out or thrown under the bus, kind of thing. But yeah, so Steve Bannon says, "I'm a Leninist too," right? And that's an interesting statement, because what do we hear about? How does the author describe Lenin? What kind of things does he say about him? Mostly at the beginning.
Sophisticated genius.
A sophisticated genius, okay, what else? What else does he say? He's a sophisticated genius of merciless zero-sum gain. What does that mean when something is a zero-sum situation? In a way, things that are zero-sum mean that, like, there's a winner and a loser, right? There's no way that we both win. Either I win or you do, right? It's winner take all kind of thing. So zero-sum games are, yeah, it's a winner take all, sort of bloodthirsty, manipulative, merciless kind of way to live, or way to approach politics, right? He's saying here, kto kovo, right? Who and whom, right? So if you want to make something happen, you figure out who has the power, right? Who controls whom, right? And then or who kills whom, right? You apply the pressure where it's needed, right? Whether it's violence or assassination, whether it's conspiracy, right? Conspiratia, or disinformation, fake news as we call it nowadays, right? All of this comes from the Bolsheviks, right? And think back to V for Vendetta, okay? So when we watch V for Vendetta, we looked at the government, and I think we pretty easily saw some similarities with the Nazis, right? So the chancellor was very kind of Hitler-like. Their sort of branding, their colors, their logos were all very kind of Nazi-like. And so we kind of very easily compared the government in V for Vendetta to the Nazis. But really, the way that government operated, with the propaganda and the media and the secret police and the black baggings and all of that stuff, is like textbook Soviet operations. Okay, this surveillance of citizens and monitoring people, textbook Soviet Union, right? So that government in V for Vendetta was kind of a Nazi government in a very obvious way, but in many, many other ways, it was a textbook communist Soviet government, right? One that manipulated the news, one that used fear to ensure that the people were following the rules, that used the secret police, the KGB, right? You've heard of the KGB? The KGB are the fingermen of the Soviet Union, right? And so all of these things are kind of created by Lenin or created by his successor Stalin, and they become a very important part of living in that society. And again, in the movie, there's some textbook Soviet Union stuff. But again, on the surface, it looks more like a Nazi fascist government, if you will. He says that the Bolshevik revolution was unlikely to succeed in some ways. How was it unlikely to succeed? There's a bunch of things.
Like the emperors actually reformed.
Right. So the people were upset, right? There were food shortages and issues, but if the Tsar or the Tsar's family had simply made the appropriate reforms, maybe they'd still have a Tsar, right? Or maybe they'd have some sort of constitutional monarchy thing. Who knows, right?
They stayed in the war for another year.
Yeah.
We would have shared the victory as well.
Yeah, I mean, we started talking about the Russia story in 1905, and the Russian Revolution happens in 1917. That's 12 years, right?
So they could have done something.
Yeah, the Tsar had 12 years to fix the problems and did nothing, right? So he could have fixed those things, and then we'd have no Russian Revolution, right? What other things made it unlikely to succeed?
Yeah, what I also said, seems like Lenin stated is like he can say the revolution like he was strong enough. But Lenin said that
That was Lenin saying he didn't think the revolution would happen?
yeah.
Yeah. So at one point earlier on, Lenin kind of looked at the situation in Russia and said, I don't think it's going to happen, right? I don't think, the people aren't ready. We're not industrialized. It's not coming from the bottom like Marx said it would. And Lenin says to his wife, he's like, yeah, I would like this communist revolution thing to happen, but I just don't see how the people are ready, right? I don't see how it's going to come from the bottom. Obviously, at some point after that, he decided to take matters into his own hands, but at the time he said, no, the people aren't ready, right? Why else was it unlikely to succeed or happen? They're talking about there's a moment where the Tsar steps down, right?
Yeah, the secret police.
Okay, so the Tsar has secret police hunting down opposition to the Tsar, and so they don't find him, right? So he flees at one point, right? Lenin flees to Finland, I think. But yeah, he's not caught, right? But the government is trying to catch him and others like him and kill them. But the government does not manage to catch him. What happens when the Tsar, or what's the deal when the Tsar steps down? What do they say?
Lenin thought it was a hoax at first.
Right? But where is he?
Wait, it was Tsar or Lenin?
Lenin. Yeah, here it is. Oh no,
Oh, wait. No, it wasn't it.
here it is. Yeah, it's it says here. Ultimately, yeah, it was a spontaneous crisis of military loyalty that forced Nicholas's abdication. So the Tsar steps down, right? This is the moment, right? This is the moment we've all been waiting for to seize power. The Tsar has stepped down, and where is Lenin? Zurich? Switzerland, right?
Oh, yeah.
Zurich. So Lenin's in Switzerland. His right-hand man, Trotsky, where's he?
New York.
He's in New York. And his other right-hand man, Joseph Stalin, where's Stalin?
Siberia.
Way out in Siberia, right? So the moment comes, the Tsar steps down. This is where you step in and seize power, but none of them are even in Russia, right? So they miss their opportunity, right? What other reasons are there for this not happening? Tell me about the storming of the Winter Palace.
There was no storming.
There was no storming?
It wasn't really a storm.
Wasn't a storm?
It took days to seize control of the building.
Yeah. Let me give you some advice, okay? So if you are ever in a position where you're trying to overthrow the government, okay?
Find the unlocked window.
Find an unlocked window. If you're ever going to overthrow the government, you need to do it quick, okay? The longer it takes,
You might want to mute the stream for this.
yeah, though I know this is going to come back and haunt me later, right?
You're gonna get an email from
This-
the government. We couldn't need you to come in.
In like 20 years, when one of you overthrows a government, it'll be like, this is where they learned it. Yeah, if you're ever overthrowing a government, you need to move fast, right? The longer it takes, your chances of success are going to decrease, right? You want to cut the communication lines, you want to get into the building quickly, you want to make sure you grab everyone in power and either throw them in jail or execute them right away.
Alright, hold on, let me just take notes real quick.
Yes, do not screw around, do not take your time, right? Because again, the longer you take, the more time there is for, I don't know, the people to get involved or the military to stop you. You got to be quick, right? But here we see that the Bolsheviks are slow. It takes them days to do this, right? They probably shouldn't have succeeded if they weren't that organized, right? But somehow they managed to do it. That was the thing with Erdogan, right? So Erdogan of Turkey, there was an attempt to overthrow the government, but they didn't grab him, right? He was, I think, at an airport, and he got his phone out and live streamed to the Turkish people and said, they're trying to take over the government, resist, stand up for Turkey. And people did, and the overthrow failed, right? So you've got to grab the leader and make sure that he can't appeal to the people. Same thing will happen in 1990, when Boris Yeltsin, the president of Russia, will do the same thing. There's a group that will try to overthrow the government, and Boris Yeltsin will be there to kind of rally the people. So again, the longer these things take, the worse it's going to go for you. So when you overthrow the government, do it quick, right? Be organized, get in there, grab everybody, especially presidents and prime ministers, and actually it'll probably be easier for you if you just execute them right away.
On the spot.
Yeah.
Alright, got you.
Okay.
I'll call you.
Glad I could help. Glad I could help you there. Oh wait, and I think there's one more way too. No, there's a couple more ways. There's not to overthrow a couple more ways that the revolution was unlikely to succeed. Let's see. Something happened in August 30th, 1918.
He almost got shot.
Yeah, I think he was shot actually,
Oh yeah, he was.
but he lived.
Yeah.
Right?
Survived 5 inches.
Yeah, so somebody almost assassinated Lenin, but he lived. Whew. Right? And one more thing, but it comes a little bit earlier. It's before the storming of the Winter Palace. What does it say here? Yeah, so Trotsky and Stalin, they had to overpower their Bolshevik comrades. So they had to sort of convince the other Bolsheviks to do this. Other Bolsheviks wanted to cooperate with the provisional government, right? And Lenin and Trotsky had to go in and convince them, no, we're not cooperating. This is our moment to seize power, right? And imagine had the Bolsheviks not gone along with it, right? Imagine if the Bolsheviks said, you know what, Lenin, you're crazy, right? We're not doing that. We're cooperating. No revolution, right? So there's all these things, right? This long storming of the palace, the fact that Lenin was almost killed, that he, almost had his moment to take power, but then he wasn't even in the country, right? And So this thing was kind of unlikely to succeed, but somehow they managed to succeed. And actually, the other thing that happens is that after they take power, there's this coalition that mounts an army to try to kick them out again, right? This is the civil war between the Red Army and the White Army. And as we'll read very shortly, the White Army loses, right? Because they're not very organized, they're not very coordinated. And so again, even after the revolution, if the White Army was more organized, they could have kicked the Bolsheviks out and reestablished the Provisional Government. But they screwed it up too, right? So all of these things that could have ended this process somehow either didn't happen or happened in a particular way. And so this thing that was maybe unlikely to happen by some miracle does. So what does the author say about the world being a different place without the Russian Revolution? This is what you were talking about earlier, right, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How would the world be different?
From many different aspects, like from the east and the south of the global, like they are totally different. And like some countries have the help from, like have the assist from the Soviet Union and
Yeah.
Russia, and they may not get the help, and they may not develop like this.
Yeah, and China's probably the prime example of that, right? Mao takes control of China in 1949, establishes People's Republic, and China gets a lot of help, right? Money and investment and technology from Soviet Union, right? With no Soviet Union, I'm not really sure what China looks like today. Very different, right? But who knows, right? How else would the world be different?
World War II may have never happened.
Maybe no World War II. Why not?
Hitler was inspired by
Uh,
Lenin.
Not quite inspired, but what was he?
He got like ideas from Lenin about control and power. Yes.
No, I'm not sure that he did. Maybe, but the Bolsheviks had another purpose for Hitler.
Support.
Nope. Not so much inspiration, but
Or they pissed him off.
well, he used them as he tapped into the fear of Bolshevism, right? So 1917, the Russians have a Russian Revolution. Russia is overthrown by communists, and what Hitler did was say, hey, if we're not careful, the same thing will happen to Germany, right? It almost did, right? We remember when we read that the communists actually overthrew the Weimar government for a few days before they were able to kick them back out. So Germany came like narrow, Germany almost had its own communist revolution, right? And everyone was scared of communism, scared of Bolshevism. And so one of Hitler's things was like, hey, look, if you're not careful, if you don't put me in power, you're going to have a Bolshevik revolution right here in Germany, right? And of course, the wealthy Germans were afraid of that because communism means that, communism means that everyone's equal. You don't get to keep all of your wealth if it's communism. So the rich people in Germany were like, no, we don't want communism, right? And so Hitler was able to gain power by positioning Bolshevism as, a thing to be afraid of. And Hitler will deliver you from that, right? He'll save you from Bolshevism. What else would have been different? No World War, a different China. I was going to say not no China, but a different China.
I think also like the 1920s wouldn't have happened the way they happened.
Okay, why not?
Because most of the changes that happened were based on making the world better because the World War. So it could never happen. It wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah, right. A lot of things come out of both world wars, but yeah, like we come out of World War II in particular maybe with this idea that we really don't want this to happen again, right? We have the Holocaust, we have a bunch of people dead. There's lessons that we need to learn from those wars, and if one of those wars doesn't happen, maybe we don't learn those lessons, right? Maybe we go on to make bigger mistakes, right? World War II was, there was a lot of mistakes there, but maybe we go on to make bigger ones if it never happens. Who knows? What else would have been different?
Korea, North Korea.
North Korea, right? There wouldn't be a North Korea, I suspect, right? Because North Korea exists because the communists attempt to take control of all of Korea, right? And so it gets divided after the war. No communists, no division,
No Cold War.
no Cold War, right? That's a big one. That's huge, right? We haven't gotten here yet, but the Cold War is a time when the US becomes the country we know and love. Remember, I said a number of times that, that the United States of the past isn't the United States that we know, right? So the United States before 1945 is pretty isolationist. They mind their own business. If there's a war going on in Europe, yes, they'll send you weapons, but it's like, let us know how it goes. We're taking care of our own backyard, right? But now, of course, we know that the US is kind of the global policeman, right? They've got their nose in everyone's business, for better or worse. And they become that because of the Soviet Union, right? They become that because of the threat of the spread of communism. And so the US realizes they're the only one that can stand up to this force, and so they do, right? They step into this role of global policeman. But without the Soviet Union, maybe they don't do that. Maybe they just go back and become isolationist again. And then what kind of world do we have? I don't know. I don't know, right? Yeah, like it's so big, and it affects so many things. It's impossible to kind of think about what does our world look like today if the Russian Revolution doesn't happen, if World War II doesn't happen, if there's no Cold War, if China doesn't become a communist country. Like what? That's almost all of it, right? Think of the Russia today with Vladimir Putin in charge. He wouldn't be in charge, right? He wouldn't be in charge of Russia today with no Russian Revolution. What if the United States doesn't become kind of the global policeman that we know them to be? Like that, everything we know about the world now doesn't count if this doesn't happen, right? So, yeah, like I don't know. I can't imagine anything. I don't know what would have happened had this not happened. Wild, right? One more question for you here. Why? This was from 2017, obviously, right? So the 100th year anniversary of October Revolution, and you would think that the Russians would be da 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 da, with parades and celebrations, and nothing, not a peep, right? Why didn't the government mark this event? Why didn't they celebrate it?
Don't want the same thing happening again.
Probably, but can you be a little more specific with that?
They don't want another revolution.
Who doesn't want another revolution?
Russia. Putin.
Yeah, right? Because again, the October Revolution is an overthrow of the state, right? That's the story of 1917, is that a political party comes in, overthrows the government, and takes control. But does Putin want that? No, right? And interestingly, he puts a lot of importance and value on Russia's history, but not on this piece, right? Because he's looking at, would you say, in your opinion, would you say that Putin is totally in control of Russia?
No.
Like, yeah. Would you say that he basically rules like a king?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe? No? You don't think so? Why not?
Also, the king is like the Hitler, the king controls all this, but I think that there is still some control with
Say that last part again?
like I don't think he can deal with like what he can do. I think there are still some people who has rights to control him.
That's probably true, right? So Putin's very powerful within Russia. There are other powerful people that he has to manage and deal with. So he can't really do 100% whatever he wants. But he does have a lot of power, does he not? Yeah. And so he doesn't really want to tell the story of the overthrow of a state, right? So the article's saying he prefers to look at the Tsarist Russia, right? The time when Russia was glorious and had, strong single leaders, right? Tsars. Or he tends to look at the history of the Soviet Union under Stalin, right? Where Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist, which he did, right? Those are the stories that Putin wants to tell. He doesn't want to tell the story of the overthrow of the state, right? Because that's not good for him. He doesn't want to be overthrown, does he? No, he does not, right? Because again, he's just changed the constitution so that he can stay in power until 2034, I think, now. So another 12 years. He doesn't want to be overthrown. He wants to stay in power. So he doesn't want to tell this story, right? This story doesn't tell the story of Russia that he wants people to hear. So he focuses on other things, right? But of course, the rest of the world, like we were just doing, we know how big a deal it is, right? Huge, huge deal. That's so interesting. Okay, you want to take a little break?
I mean, if we keep talking, then maybe it's ending class a bit earlier.
Uh-huh.
That's like, we take a 10-minute break, then we talk for 5 minutes.
That's true. See, that would make sense though, but because we started so late, because people kind of took a while to find their way in here. However, you do make sense.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay, let's see oh, that's actually my last slide. Okay, let me just see. Give me a second here. Let me just pull up my, so that's that. Okay. 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 All right. Well, I have some reading for you to do. That's the next thing I have. So here it is. Here it is. So I'll let you take some time to read. I'm just going to have to dump this into Microsoft Teams because it's not there. We actually got a little further than I thought we would today, so that's good. Just give me 1 second here. Oh. 7577. Okay. All right, so these pages are in Microsoft Teams now. I'll let you get started on reading them, and then maybe, yeah, we can probably answer some of these questions before the end, but yeah, I'll put some time on the clock and we can read. I'm going to just try not to melt into a puddle. We've still got boxes from the move to unpack, so I'm gonna suggest that we do that because we can just stay inside. Hopefully it'll be cool. Can get a little work done and not, totally melt, but we'll see. See how it goes. What about you? Ooh. Yeah, you're looking a little pale.
My thighs are white and my palms are brown.
I would
I'll try to get them solid.
bring an umbrella or some way to shade yourself. Bring lots of liquid. I guess that's good though. You can just go in the water to cool off, so that'll work. Kitts Beach is awesome though.
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite places in Vancouver, but if
Thinking about having a bonfire. Apparently that's pretty common to do here.
yeah, it's great to do. I don't know if you're allowed to do it at Kitts Beach. You may want to find out what you're allowed to do, but
I'll find out when I'm doing it.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah, that's nice though. Yeah, I really like Kitts Beach, and it's it feels very Vancouver to me. Just because you can see the city and the mountains, and there's English Bay, and yeah, you'll enjoy yourself, I'm sure.
I'm dying to go for a swim as well.
Yeah, you can do that. Okie dokie, people. I think that's enough for today. Come back tomorrow. We'll deal with the death of Lennon. Sorry, spoiler alert. I should have told you. He dies.
We went on it.
What's that?
It was in the text.
I know. So Lenin will die. He'll be replaced by Stalin, and we'll deal with that tomorrow. Okay, so pack it up. Have a good afternoon. I'll see you then. Okay. See you tomorrow, Miles.